the analysis of the succession process in North Korea and China was eye-opening in terms of the lead up to both countries and both regimes going through that type of process, because in many cases they were viewed independently. But I think there were very interesting symmetrical developments, and this introduces the debate of whether these were coincidental or there was some kind of causal link. But if you look specifically from that period when Kim Jong-il has his devastating health crisis, his stroke in August of 2008, there was a period that fall where the debate in Washington was that he was either dead or incapacitated. But nonetheless, this was the beginning of the collapse of North Korea. And there were efforts at the highest levels to engage the Chinese in discussions about contingency planning, how to deal with the failed state in North Korea. When Kim Jong-il came back on the scene in February of 2009, at that time, you saw the director of the International Liaison Department of the Communist Party of China going to Pyongyang, Xinhua news camera team videotaping everything. Kim Jong-il was documented and videotaped being in full command of his speech and movements and whatnot. So it quickly ended those suspicions and those worries and those very large worst case scenarios. But with that, you see Kim Jong-il implementing this accelerated leadership succession process. And a key element of that were the 3 visits that he made to China during the period of about May 2010 to May 2011. Again, the analysis here was predominantly done on post-trip analysis. Every time he went, the reading of the tea leaves. But if you take a step back and look at that as a part of a larger process, there was very important incremental institution building with the Communist Party of China and a resurgence of the Workers' Party of Korea through Kim Jong-il's movements in these areas. And with that, you see the beginning of Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un at that time being referred to as the rising generation of the party, the coordination of the leadership transitions in both countries happening in a way that was quite startling. When Kim Jong-il, in one particular visit, went over, he brought a very senior Workers' Party delegation, and he was met by every current and future leader on the Chinese Communist Party side. And the type of red carpet that they received is unprecedented. And so with that, you get the sense that the type of relationship between the party to party, there's something more going on. And my take on what the big factor was this is a Chinese effort to rebuild what was essentially a broken relationship. If we look at what I think in many circles is seen as ancient history, but in Asia seen as almost a bat of an eye yesterday, in August of 1992, China decided to normalize relations with South Korea. China was in desperate straits. They had basically been the subject of intense sanctions themselves after '89 in Tiananmen. And so you see the situation where China needed the type of benefits that South Korea was offering at that time as part of its broader northern policy. And so in return for trade credits from South Korea to China, and South Korea's help getting the Asian Games for the Chinese fundamentally reoriented their relationship with North Korea and essentially severed the old ways of doing business. The North Koreans responded by calling this the Great Betrayal and cutting off all party-to-party ties. We have about a lost decade in very high-level party-to-party interactions between China and North Korea. And if you recall this time period in the early 1990s where the North Koreans crank out plutonium in their Yongbyon facility, they go by the way of putting all their eggs in that one basket of racing towards further increasing their nuclear capabilities, even at that very nascent stage. But also, North Korea goes through the Great Famine, and by some economists' accounts, North Korea becomes a fully fledged failed state. In the late 90s, early 2000 period, we see the advent of Chinese strategic aid. And this is essentially, I think, in many respects, the bailing out of North Korea. And it's through this type of relationship that we see North Korea slowly recovering.
We're talking about fuel and foodstuffs.
Exactly, exactly. And so it was survival aid. And with that, the culmination of what we see as this process was not a linear improvement. There was definitely a period where it wasn't all just rehabilitation of the party-to-party relationship, because the 17 years of Kim Jong-il's rule was definitely through the military, through the National Defense Commission. When he came on the scene and succeeded his father in 1994 after his father's death, Kim Jong-il inherits a broken state. If you think of a broken company, he jettisons, frankly, many parts of it and focuses on the military, the only viable organization through which he can run the country. And he does so for 17 years to the point where the party atrophies in North Korea. And it's through this decision of how to facilitate this rapid succession process with his son, Kim Jong-un, that we see this very rapid resurgence of the Workers' Party of Korea. So rapid that in September of 2010, when they convene a party conference, the first order of business is voting in new delegates because many of the delegates had died and hadn't been replaced because the party didn't meet in the way that it had in the past. So this point about the party to party is significant because right now I think what we're seeing is further institutionalization of that relationship and the succession of Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un in their respective party structures now at a level where both of them have mirror positions in terms of the main titles. So Xi Jinping is the chairman of the Central Military Commission of the party. Kim Jong-un holds similar titles. In areas where Xi Jinping holds the definitive top title, Kim Jong-un usually holds first minister or something first to denote that his father holds the official title in that area. So one of the legacy, eternal president, as Kim Il-sung is referred to, Kim Jong-il has certain similar eternal titles as well. But in operational sense, they are both the respective heads of these very important bodies within the military and the party structures. So with that, I think what we see right now is a Chinese effort to further implement what they call the balanced Korean Peninsula strategy. The Chinese really don't have a standalone North Korea policy or a standalone South Korea policy. So it's always interesting to see when we see efforts from Washington or Seoul to pressure Beijing to do something via their North Korea policy. That is one piece of it, but without really taking into account that larger Chinese game plan of having a balanced Korean Peninsula strategy.